Hey there everybody, welcome to Tucktuk's Trinkets and Terrain. My name's David, and in this video I'm going to show you how I made this modular temple portal room, really whatever it is I need it to be. Just got to make more of these little insert pieces here, and it can be pretty much whatever I want it to be for any given adventure, which is pretty sweet. It was pretty easy to make. The materials were very cheap as well. It's actually something that I've never used before, and I don't think I've seen anybody else use. And that's kitchen backsplash tiles, which you would use on like the walls in your kitchen. Comes in a bunch of different varieties as well, so excited to see what I can find and use in different projects. But let's jump into the video and I'll show you what I did. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you enjoy. Alright, so this is the kitchen tile that I was talking about. You can see it's made up of a bunch of these little tiny hexagons on this sort of back piece. They peel right off, nice and easy, and it gives you this little tiny piece to work with. So I tore all those off, and then this is the shape that I kind of came up with for my room. I also discovered that you can actually use dry erase markers on these. So if you use these and don't paint them, you can actually just write right on them with like a whiteboard marker, and it comes right off nice and easy. So it's kind of a useful thing to use further down the road. But to base the whole thing, I'm gonna use this full sheet of chipboard. But before that, I wanted to get some pillars made up to use in the layout. So what I did is I just glued a single piece of the tile onto a chunk of XPS foam, and then I used that as a guideline for my hot wire cutter. Next up, it was just a process of using some PVA glue to glue all these down into my floor shape. I just used the edge of the chipboard here to make sure my little pieces were straight, and then just butted them up, trying to keep at least two sides touching when I put the next one down, so there wasn't going to be any discrepancies further down the road. Now here I'm just laying out where I'm going to cut out what will be like the modular piece, and I'm just lining it with these black pieces so that I know where it is. And I lay all these ones down where I will cut out. I ended up taking these out in a little bit. I just put them down here so that I knew everything past this point would still be straight and all lined up nicely. And once that was all dry, I removed all those tiles, like I said, and then cut out the piece in the middle. I can use this for my template for my individual pieces down the road, but I'm going to set that aside and work on just the room. You can see I've cut off all the extra chipboard around the edges, but I need to cover up the zigzagging of the outside line. So I cut up these strips of XPS foam, and I'm just going to use these as sort of the walls in like a 2.5D style, sort of like dungeon tiles. So simple process here, I just cut these to shape. I did make sure to mirror these on both sides so that the cut lines were the same. And then I just used hot glue to glue all these down on top of the tiles, covering that uneven edge. And then to cover the outside, because there's obviously still a gap between the tiles and the bottom, I cut some thin pieces of XPS foam here. These are going to be like the outside wood planks that encompass the building. And again, just using some hot glue to secure these down and then cutting them to length as I go around. Again, mirroring the cut lines and where the individual pieces to meet up to make sure it's the same on both sides. And do that all the way around, using plenty of hot glue to make sure they're secure, because these thinner pieces are pretty fragile. And then to give the outside some texture, I'm just using an old wire brush here to put in some wood grain lines. You can see here, if you're unfamiliar with this is just a dollar store wire brush for like cleaning off a barbecue or something like that. And if you just gently rake it across the foam, you get these really nice lines that simulate natural wood grain. It's a really nice effect once it's all painted up. You do have to be somewhat careful, as if you go too hard you can just rip and tear the foam completely. And then one more detail on the wood here, I'm just going to use this little tool to put in some nail holes all around the outside, just to sell the fact that it is wood around the outside. Next up, I wanted to have some actual grout in my tiles, and then also texture all of the foam on the inside of the building. So just using some joint compound here, and I started off by applying it with a brush, but I ended up just going with my fingers as it gave a nice smooth finish, where the brush is more of a rough texture. So I just spread that around all over everything on the inside of the building here, being careful to avoid the wood paneling would be on the outside of the building. And you can see as I spread it on the individual tiles here, it fills in the gaps very nicely, just like you would with like an actual grout. Really blends the whole thing together. And I get rid of most of the excess with a wet paper towel to clean it up a little bit. I intentionally don't do this perfectly because I still want some rough texture on the tiles for when I dry brush down the road. I then used some hot glue and glued in my 4 pillars into their spots so that I can apply the same joint compound to these as well. That way they can be melded all in and it all looks like one cohesive piece. For these I do go back to using the brush because I did want to give them a little bit of a different texture than the rest of the walls. Here's a close-up of the brush strokes that I was talking about. You can see it leaves a nice texture in the joint compound. Again, just to give it a little bit of difference from the rest of the room. Once that was all dry, I got the Mod Podge and black paint mixture and painted all over everything to not only protect the foam, but also protect the joint compound, as it is a very thin layer and quite fragile. But while I'm doing that, I just want to remind you, if you're interested in supporting the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you are aware of when I post new videos. New videos come out every other Friday. If you are enjoying the video, please hit the like button as well. Leave a comment of some suggestions that you think I could have done differently, or if you use these kitchen tiles before, I'd be interested to know. I haven't seen anybody else use these, but I would like to check out some other projects or ideas that other people have had. And share this video with your friends if you think they would enjoy it as well. I am very close to qualifying for the YouTuber partnership program thing, so every little bit helps and I do appreciate it. So with the black Mod Podge all dry, I went ahead with the base coats of my colors. For the tiles, I'm going to use this navy blue. I tried to go with a nice neutral color that was a little more unique than just painting these like a normal stone or maybe like a marble, something like that. So I thought this dark blue would be nice. For the outside wood, I used this burnt umber to give it a more sort of newer wood feel rather than something that's older or run down. And then for all of the joint compound sort of stucco on the inside, I'm going to use this linen color and paint the inside walls as well as the pillars. For an overbrush on the tile, I use this gray color to hit all the highlights on the leftover joint compound. For the outside wood, I overbrush with this spiced pumpkin to give it an orangey color. Again, just making it look more like newer wood rather than some old decrepit wood of a rundown building. I then covered everything with my homemade black wash. I tried very hard to apply a very thin layer of this as I didn't want to darken the piece too much. I did layer it on somewhat heavily on the tile just so that all the recesses really stood out and I got that nice hexagonal pattern on the inside. Once that was dry, I did a final dry brush with this sand gray all over everything to bring back all the textures on all the different pieces. And then one final step for the main building here, I just blacked out the tops of the columns as they're sort of in a negative space. So next up, I wanted to make a couple different inserts for the inside of the room here. So using my template from earlier, I made 3 different ones. On the left here is just a solid piece of dollar store foam board cut into that shape, and then I've got the 2 other ones here with obviously a circle cut out in the middle. These are all base with just a rough chipboard to make them closer to the same height as the rest of the structure. So the first one here, I painted it this platinum color, and then I went to my computer and printed out this symbol of Elustrei, which is a drow goddess in Faerun if you're unfamiliar. But I just glued this piece of paper down after cutting it out onto my piece here. This would turn the room into, sort of a temple with a few other pieces of scattered terrain relatively quickly and easily. I wasn't about to freehand this symbol here, which is why I used the computer to print it out. I also applied a layer of glue all over the top. This would not only give it a nice sort of glossy sheen all over everything, but it would just help secure the piece of paper to the foam board underneath. I also dry brushed the edges with a silver color, which is pretty hard to see on camera, but here is the final result for that one. For the next one here, I used this wine color and painted the outside of my circle here. And then these are just some chipboard discs that I'm going to use as stencils with this paint pen to create sort of a arcane ritual circle. These paint pens are great for this sort of thing, so I don't have to deal with a brush bleeding over or giving you uneven lines or anything like that. And then I just use all those stencils to make a interesting sort of base, and then I go back in and make a bunch of sort of magic ruin sort of things to give it an overall look. And that one is done. For the last one, I painted the whole thing with a metallic purple and then spread a bunch of different glitter on the inside. I then mixed up a 2-part resin, tinted it a blue, and then I'm going to pour that in to make sort of a magical portal. So I pour that in, making sure not to overflow the edges here. This is a 2-part 24-hour cure resin that I usually use for like water effects, but if you dye it different colors, you can use it for really anything. I then mixed up a smaller batch of a darker color and sort of swirled it in to the original pour while it was still wet. And then I just use a popsicle stick to swirl it around to give it a nice portal appearance. I do mix in some acrylic paint as well on top of this and swirl it around. You can kind of see it in the final product here, just to really enunciate the swirling pattern that I was going for. But with that, everything is complete, and this is the final result. So first off, we got our Drow temple to Elestrei. You can see I've got the altar there on top, and the Drow centered around the temple. I only made 3 of these inserts for this video, but I can obviously make many, many more and do a bunch of different things, all sorts of different deities, different portals, really whatever I want. Here's the magic circle. We got a wizard summoning a demon in his laboratory. This project was super fun, super cheap, super easy. These tiles were super awesome to work with and made the floor look really awesome, and I know that I wouldn't be able to freehand this and make it look nearly as good. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. And then the final one here, the royal portal room with some guards standing by. I do have an Instagram account if you want to check that out. I post in-progress pictures of things I'm working on, as well as a few other things every now and then. And I also have an Etsy shop if you want to check that out. If you want to pick up some dungeon tiles and accessories, links for both of those are in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe, like, leave a comment, all that good YouTube stuff. But more than anything, thank you so much for stopping by. Hope to see you next time.